Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Wasatch Report. I am your host for the next hour. My name is Suzanne Sherman here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. I don't think we did a show yet this week, Jeff. I think we did it last week. Jeff Johnson's in the studio manning the control panels here. Thank you very much. And want to talk to you a little bit today about prepping, going back to our roots a little bit. I think before we were fortunate enough to have our good friend Mark Kreslins join me for the Mark and Suzanne show, Revolutionizing Radio, I kind of picked up the political aspect of things that are going on right now. And today we're going to kind of take a deep breath and look a little bit at preparedness, why we need to prepare. I'm going to bring in some of the issues going on socially and politically and use them as examples also as why we need to prepare. Jeff, I want to thank you for encouraging me to do this. It's kind of fun to get back to our my roots, as you say.
I'm sorry. I am still doing my stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so want to remind everybody you can follow us on Facebook. I want to thank all the new followers we've been getting. Facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. We have a fan page, CRN. You can follow us. Please subscribe to our YouTube page. We are on SoundCloud as well, all with the same name. Please share, subscribe, tell your friends, free downloads. We have tried Facebook boosting, all that other stuff. It doesn't seem to work. What's really working is you, our listeners. The followers we have are so dedicated and so loyal. If we want to grow this network and get our messages out, you guys are the reason it's happening. Big shout out also to Bob Smiley, who's been making these memes, taking pictures that he's found in my photo albums with various firearms and making some great memes using quotes from some of our articles. So those just go viral. For whatever reason, you try to post articles, people don't pay attention, but we like pictures, and that's really getting the word out. So Bob Smiley from FIJA, Fully Informed Jury Association, by the way, very, very important thing to understand is the concept of jury nullification. In fact, I'm going to be meeting Bob out in Dallas this November 10th. The Abbeville Institute is hosting a symposium on the revival of secession and nullification. So I encourage anybody to sign up for that. I think they're just taking anybody who wants to come. It's not very expensive, and you are going to be supporting the Abbeville Institute. Really, really good cause. We also have a Radio Co. link. If you go to our pages and you can click that and you can listen live. We have an Android platform. Also, if you want to take us with you on your cell phone, we always have low data options available as well. So that being said, Jeff, I think you're all set to join us now. How's it going?
Oh, going very well. Yeah, you caught me right at the tail end of making sure everything was working. I just got onto YouTube to make sure that we were broadcasting okay there. Everything's great on Radio Co, sounding good. Thank you for listening on Radio Co, the folks out there. I see people listening. We have people watching on YouTube. So thank you for listening and watching. And be prepared for a great show because Suzanne has some good stuff coming.
You know, the cool thing is I think it's one of our biggest complaints, but it also is what's wonderful about these opportunities. So many people now can have a platform, unless apparently you get too successful like Alex Jones or Jordan Peterson and say the wrong thing, you're going to get shut down. But I'm really grateful that we can reach so many people as long as it lasts, and we're going to just keep on going. I want to encourage people to watch a movie. I saw it last night. It's called The Creepy Line. Jeff, I was telling you about it. We were telling the people in our group. I posted a link to it. And it just shows the absolute control that Google and Facebook have over pretty much every aspect of our lives. And what's even scarier with all this talk we have, well, you know, free speech, First Amendment isn't implicated because these companies are privately held and this isn't government infringing upon our speech. This movie will show you how closely tied these organizations are and how they work with the government. The other thing, too, I've noticed is these tech companies are the ones really enabling the government, obviously, to do all this spying. One case, and again, these people are more concerned about profits, obviously, than liberty. Liberty's not a concern at all. I think I talked to you, Jeff, about the Textualizer. This was a company out in California. When I was there, I saw them. There's this little gizmo that police can now use and attach to your phone if you are pulled over. And like the metadata we were talking about with Greg Carpenter on our show yesterday on the Mark and Suzanne show, Revolutionizing Radio. If you missed that, you really want to hear all about metadata and how invasive this is. Under the auspices of keeping people safe and stopping texting and driving, now there is this gizmo that's come up. If you get pulled over, the police can look at your phone, hook up this bit of technology, and it will tell them exactly what you've been doing, like metadata. Don't worry, it doesn't show the content, but it will show if you've been on Facebook, if you made a call, if you received a call, if you were using your phone, if you sent an email, what you did while you were driving. Look for this to now be made mandatory, because these people are going to make this information available through lobbyists. They will encourage this to be mandatory. All the police stations across this continental landmass are going to have it. You get pulled over, expect to surrender your phone, but trust them, they're not going to look at the content. This is what we went into yesterday with metadata. So if you missed that show, I want to encourage you to go back. All of our shows, by the way, are archived and available for your perusal on SoundCloud in particular. And I want to also alert you, go there and listen to Greg Carpenter's Liberty Minutes. They're between 5 and 15 minutes. They're great presentations on a multitude of topics. This guy knows everything. He is wicked smart. Dave Benner, also one of my favorite historians, is doing some history videos, some short, sweet presentations, and we're uploading those as well. He's the author of my favorite book on incorporation, the 14th Amendment and the Incorporation Doctrine. If you think the Supreme Court, the federal judiciary, is the answer to vanguarding our liberties and our rights, he will explain in this book. It's a short little booklet why you're so wrong. So, Jeff, why don't we get to the meat and taters of this? I want to talk about self-reliance first and foremost from a personal security matter. 2 cases caught my attention the past few weeks, and since we didn't do a Wasatch Report, I just did not get to them. But there were 2 instances where women were killed by men with whom they were in relationships. And in both cases, the police and the justice system failed them. This is why it is so incumbent upon you and your family to be able to defend yourselves. I want to start first. This happened a few weeks ago. This was in Memphis, Tennessee. And the date of this article is October 28th of this year. And they said domestic violence incident turns deadly when a man runs over a woman. Now, this wasn't some area in an isolated community. This was in a neighborhood where people actually saw as this was occurring. The article starts by saying a gruesome murder near Orange Mound has community members shocked and heartbroken. Police responded to a call Sunday night and found a woman who had been severely beaten and run over. A neighbor watched it all unfold. He said, "We saw a car driving back and forth across the lawn, and we didn't know what was happening from where we could see, but it turned out we were witnessing the murder occurring." So again, you can't count on your neighbors to go out and investigate. Here's the thing too, where do you draw the line between minding your own business and looking out for your neighbors? That's a discussion for another day. Police responded to an armed party call at a house. They say witnesses heard a woman scream, and it turned out to be their neighbor. Her name was Amanda Petrowski. The father of their children, Sandra's trailer, was said to be hitting her in the head with a brick or a rock. I didn't realize the severity of what was happening just right across the street. This was a witness that, again, said he saw the car going back and forth. Witnesses said Traylor then got in a car and ran her over several times near her porch. Bloody damage and tire marks could be seen. One neighbor told us she was on the phone, this is crucial, with police for 8 minutes as they waited for them to arrive. He was about to leave when the officers showed up and he tried to flee. He drove across the yard into the street when the cops took off after him. This is a quote from the neighbor again. That was the last I saw of the incident. She was pronounced dead on the scene. The gentleman here had been arrested multiple times in the past 3 years for abusing her. His recent arrest was just last month, and he now faces second-degree murder charges and 2 counts of aggravated assault. Jeff, what leaps out the most to you in this story?
The amount of time that the caller was on the phone with the dispatcher. That means if she was on the phone for 8 minutes, I don't know. Is that when the police finally arrived, 8 minutes after she made her call?
She was on the phone for 8 minutes. This is what I tell people. You think you can call the police. They're not going to get there immediately. They cannot get there immediately. This is why we have a surveillance system set up pretty much covering every piece of real estate there is. They know they can't get everywhere. It makes it easy for them to solve crimes after the fact, but does that help you when you're being beaten about the head by a brick and run over repeatedly by a car? It doesn't. As I've said before, the legal standard for the legitimate use of lethal force is when you have an imminent and immediate fear of serious bodily injury or death to yourself or others. The legitimacy is judged by what we call the reasonable person test. Would a reasonable person under same or similar circumstances have this fear that I just mentioned? Any one of those neighbors could have intervened and put this guy down. This woman obviously had a lot of issues and history with this gentleman. I don't know the nature of their relationship at the time. They didn't say there had been any sort of a restraining order. As we know, a piece of paper is no defense to something like this. That being said, when you know you have been tormented by a person like this who is still out and about, Jeff, what do you think the reasonable thing to do is? If you know somebody's this deranged and you have this violent history, you need to ramp up your security. You really need to carry at all times. Do you think that's unreasonable, Jeff?
No. As I've said numerous times in the past, there's very little time that, perfect example. As I sit here at the main board at Service Radio Network, doing my producer's duties for Susan, I am armed at this very moment. I'm armed every moment I'm in my house, every time I'm outside the house. Whenever I go anywhere, I'm armed. Why? Not because I'm expecting to use it. I'm armed because I don't want to have to use it, but if I need to, I have it. If I don't have it on my side, there's no response. I have to cower and hope that I get out of it alive. This way, at least I have a little bit of a chance to have some say in in whether I live or die in a armed encounter.
You know what really got me into taking my security seriously was, I don't know if you remember this case. It was out in Connecticut when there were 2 home invaders, broke into a family's home, husband, wife, and 2 beautiful young daughters. And these people ravaged these kids, and the woman tied the man up. They actually took the mother and one of the daughters out to an ATM to get money, came back. I think the father was the only survivor. And I thought, you think you're okay, you think you're at home, but Jeff, if you had a firearm on you, because they had young kids. So where's the safest place to have a firearm when you have young kids? On your body, on your person. And that made me realize when you really need help, you might not be able to get to the phone. Or look how long it took this woman. 8 minutes is a pretty quick response. I had a friend in Los Altos where I grew up. She was in the bank down this on Main Street. Armed robber came in. The police station is literally a mile away, less as the crow flies. Took 20 minutes for them to show up. And she couldn't understand why. And I tried to explain to her, they cannot get there quickly. So it really is up to you. And she was very surprised. Again, people are caught off guard and think that they're going to be there quickly, and they're not. We had a really, go ahead.
I was going to say, listen, the fact of the matter is, and Suzanne is getting back to her roots a bit. And this is about prepping, being prepared. And, you know, TV is kind of sensationalized prepping to the point where it's like doomsday preppers. Well, you know what? Prepping isn't about the apocalypse coming, the zombie apocalypse. Well, it's about being prepared if something, you know, as an example, you were talking about home invasions. Within about this last year, we probably had 2 home invasions in this region. In one of them, the male homeowner was murdered. So does that mean that, you know, it can happen to you? Well, it certainly means that it's a possibility. So if you're not prepared, what do you do? If someone breaks down your door and you're not armed, you're at their mercy. And that's the whole point of prepping. And that's why Suzanne's kind of got back to it. I know you talk a lot of politics, and I talk a lot of politics, obviously. But, you know, this is where the rubber meets the road.
It really is. And when I bring these stories up, I'm trying to give people examples of why, you know, I'm not making up stuff. I'm not trying to get into, yes, EMPs are important. Yes, societal collapse is important, but think about your everyday life. And here's one more illustration, because this is something I do, you know, on the Wasatch Report, like to focus on local issues. And we had a shooting in Mill Creek a few weeks ago, and this was a justified shooting. Somebody came in that was eluding police officers from another location and started beating a Starbucks barista about the head with a metal object. We had a justified shooting, and as predicted, some of the Democrat politicians out here started criticizing the stand your ground law out here in Utah. Here we have now another incident, and this was really tragic. We had a murder of, I don't like calling it a shooting, because when you say it's a shooting, and the journalists love this, politicians love it, it kind of gives the implication that the focus is really on the gun as opposed to the evil behavior. Here we had a 37-year-old man, a convicted rapist, and a 21-year-old college student who were dating. And I'm thinking to myself when I first saw this, what the heck is a young lady like this thinking, dating a guy this age? Well, it turns out he lied about his age and everything else. And she believed him up to a point. Then she got smart, but it was too late. So here's the story. This was out of Salt Lake City. There was a man wanted in connection with the fatal shooting. And this was a gal, she's a University of Utah student. And he died. He killed himself after this. Melvin Rowland was 37 years old. They found him dead early at a Salt Lake City church. The university officials identified the student who was killed as Lauren McCluskey of Pullman, Washington. The family members were on the phone with her as she was heading to her apartment from school on Monday night. They heard her yell, "No, no, no." This was her mother heard this. "I thought she might have been in a car accident. That was the last I heard from her." In a few minutes, a young woman picked up the phone and said all of Laura's things were on the ground. This young lady had a prior relationship with Rowland. Family members told the news agency out here that she had dated him for about a month. Family members said that McCluskey had previously complained to the University of Utah police that she was being harassed by Rowland. Now, she knew this and was being harassed. So apparently what happened is he accosted her when she was walking, dragged her to the car, and shot her. I think he shot her twice. Recently, a law was passed unfortunately, the focus of it was justified as helping women on college campuses feel safe, but obviously they can't apply it to women only. You can get a provisional concealed carry permit in Utah now if you're 18 years of age. There was no reason, knowing that this guy was unstable, for this woman here not to be prepared to protect herself. They issued the police. So anyway, I just wanted to point this out, Jeff. It was a really, really tragic story. This has even been covered on Fox. It turned out the guy was released early. He was serving a 17-year sentence, or a 15-year sentence for raping a 15-year-old girl. Bad guy. Habitual liar, tried to meet women online. He was also caught trying to have sex with a 13-year-old girl he lured to a certain place online, and it was actually an undercover agent that found him there. Jeff, what do women do? Do they do background checks on guys they're going to date? I don't know. I feel bad for people that are out there on the dating scene right now.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that either. The best thing you do is be situationally aware.
Yes.
What's going on around you. Again, this is the number one thing you can do in prepping, is know your surroundings, know what's going on, know your avenues of escape, and if need be, obviously, we're definitely talking about self-defense and being armed. And if you are unable to carry a firearm, some states do allow pepper spray, and it's good to its own extent. As most of you know, I am in law enforcement. We get sprayed with it, and because we get sprayed with it, so we can know that we can fight through it. Because if we would get sprayed, we have to be able to continue to defend ourselves and defend others. So it's only good as far as it goes. You can continue to function even after you've been pepper sprayed. Is it fun? No, it's very uncomfortable. It hurts, but that's the nature of the whole thing, that you can continue to go on. So there are other options, less than lethal options. In some states, they're illegal, and you can have pepper spray or tasers. So know your local laws, and unfortunately, follow your local laws as far as concealed carry. You know how it is out there in Utah. You have your laws too that you have to follow, or you become instantly a felon. So just know what's going on in your state.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring up those two cases because both of them had the common denominator of showing that law enforcement failed, first of all, in the Utah case by letting this guy out in the first place. And obviously, we know they can't be anywhere. The first case I discussed shows 8 minutes. This guy was severely beating this woman, probably longer, but that's how long a neighbor was on the phone, 8 minutes. So also, your neighbors can't be relied on to come and save you, and nor should they be. So it's not my responsibility if my next door neighbor, well, they're a half a mile away, is in serious trouble. I would help them if I knew, but some people don't always know what's going on. Anyway, now I want to focus on the political climate and why that is another reason to be aware and not just to always have a firearm on you. That wasn't the point of this show, but these were two cases that really, to me, hammered home the point of the need to be self-reliant. So pick your calamity of why you need to be prepared. You can have some personal turmoil in your life by making a mistake and getting involved in the wrong person, or through no fault of your own. Again, not blaming fault on the other people, but let's look at society now. In general, we're talking about, here's an article you sent me, Jeff. It was from Bearing Arms. What will happen if the blue wave doesn't come? I saw something as a result of Hillary Clinton's loss that I really didn't expect. Remember when Barack Obama was elected president and he said, you need to work with our president. Get over it. You lost. Work with our president. What did the Republicans do? They pretty much worked with our president. What are we seeing now? Resist, resist, resist. We've already seen it on the deep state level. The politicians, even during the election cycle, Tim Kaine, or maybe it was right after, the vice presidential candidate for Hillary Clinton was saying there needs to be blood on the streets, or take it to the streets. We have had, since this had happened, look at Obama's, also his rhetoric. If they're going to have a fist fight, we'll bring a knife. If they bring a knife, we'll bring a gun. Eric Holder, if they go low, kick them. Maxine Waters, confront them. Hillary Clinton, you cannot be civil to Republicans until we get the House back. You cannot be civil to Republicans. These are people that, for whatever insane reason, tens of millions look up to. And we are seeing that they are taking their advice. We're seeing people having their hats taken off their head. They're being beaten for showing any indication. We just saw one. I don't know if you saw it the other day, Jeff. This was out of a Starbucks. This guy had a MAGA hat on, which, again, we're talking about personal security. That's how we started the show. We're in a political climate where I think it's foolish to go out and invite challenges based on that. You know, your ultimate goal is to survive. And if you're trying to invite trouble, that's the way to do it. Be the gray man. We'll talk about that. Let me get into this article a little bit, Jeff. For some time, it starts out, the left has been predicting a blue wave come November. While some experts are trying to walk back those predictions now, it doesn't change the fact that many street-level activists have it in their head that if their side is going to win, impeach President Trump, bring about a new age of peace, love, and totalitarianism. There's nothing peaceful and loving about the left. We know that. And you know what? A lot of the right, they're about the same. What if this doesn't happen? Well, that goes back to how I introduced this article. Look at how devastated they were, how they predicted, how they preached violence. We already saw a shooting. We're so distracted. Here's a guy that says, are those Republicans down there playing ball? Yes, they are. Boom. He shoots Representative Scalise. We're seeing this. And our politicians are calling for more. They ignored, by the way, what is it, ricin powder sent to Mattis and some other of the Trump's administration and his officials. But now we have these obviously fake bombs that they're lying about and saying were sent to the mail, and they're blaming Trump. These people are the ones calling for violence. Anyway, let me get back to the article. History has shown us that this particular brand of progressive, and again, they're on the right too, isn't known for meekly accepting the results of elections. There have been more riots in the past 2 years in this country than in the previous 20, or at least it seems that way, they said. Most of them have stemmed from people being upset that Donald Trump not only had the audacity to exist, but also become president. Remember, it was a given to these people that Hillary Clinton was going to win. We have little evidence to indicate that there won't be more of the same if the midterms shake out to be a disappointment for the far left. In fact, there's some talk on the internet that it will happen. There's some information here also. We'll see if we have time to get into. What are you going to do if you find yourself caught in a riot? That's possible too. Jeff, how many of us have to drive through major cities? Even out here in Utah, I have to go oftentimes through a major metropolitan center if I want to go anywhere. That's Salt Lake City. You don't know what's going to happen. You might not always be able to avoid something like that. Again, personal situational awareness. Keep your eye on the news, even though it's annoying. So what's going to happen? Imagine now if Trump gets to appoint another 1 or 2 Supreme Court justices, Jeff, or all this. I was talking to a friend of mine last night. There are so many circuit court federal judge positions available. He has an opportunity, and you know how I don't like looking at these top-down, get the right judges in scenarios. But from their perspective, this will be devastating. If he can get some of these judges, even on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and change this progressive march around, is it enough? We were talking about it on the Mark and Suzanne show. I think it's a pause. It buys us a little bit of time. So what do we want to do with this time? Let's make the most of it, educate people, which is why we combine prepping and politics. This is what I was saying to a friend of mine the other day. They've got an outfit out here called Ready Man. Jeff, did you finish Jeff Kirkham's book, Black Autumn? I loved it.
Oh, absolutely. I finished that. It only took me, truth be told, I probably go through 7 or 8 books a week now. Just this entertainment books. I do. It does take me a little longer with some of the other books, like 21st Century with Don Livingston or Bradford, and the Constitution.
Yeah, I get sleepy when I'm learning stuff. I have to do those a little bit at a time. But we are seeing now, again, a contingency in society that if they keep losing, they're going to get more violent. And we're also seeing articles. Here's one from American Digest that the next civil war, and I like to say, let me back up. There's not a next civil war. We didn't have a civil war. There was nothing. When we have a civil war, we have 2 or more contingencies competing, fighting, if you will, to control a geopolitical entity. That wasn't the case in the Civil War. The southern states, which became the Confederated States of America, had every right to leave the Union. We have talked about this time and time again. Secession was a condition upon which 3 of the ratifying states, Virginia, New York, and Rhode Island, agreed would be part of the terms of their acceptance under the Equal Footing Doctrine. That term applied to all the states. So when they left, it was not a civil war when Lincoln sought to bring them back in. It was an unconstitutional and illegal foreign invasion. And this is where I lose a lot of people. This is where a lot of people are, I'm done. She's just as crazy as that guy Cressland's. Bear with us and let us teach you that history. But we're going to take that as a given right now. But here's this article. It's Civil War. If it starts, it will be uglier than anyone can imagine. I encourage people to read this right now because of the heated up rhetoric of this, of the political fighting that we're having right now. How is this going to start? We really don't know. But we're seeing right now a lot of fighting in the streets, which is exactly what Tim Kaine said we should have. So be prepared. I encourage you to read this article. We'll post it, Jeff. We'll put it on all of our pages so people can see. So let's talk about some of the important factors. I still till this day get so many people telling me, how can I get started preparing? And this is why I love having you on this show with me, Jeff, because you are also a prepper. And I know people say if you are somebody that is prepared, you really shouldn't tell people. But I think the more we share the information and teach people why it's important, the better off we're going to be, because the more that are prepared, the less scarce our resources are going to be. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, it is. And again, this whole idea of prepping has been so sensationalized by television, because are you going to sit there and watch a guy that or a gal like you that cans your elk meat or your deer meat, or are you going to watch that guy that's building this 2,000 square foot bunker underground? Well, you're going to go for the sensational. Canning is just not that fun to watch. But that's prepping. You do a little canning, you grow some food, you can it, that's prepping. So are you ready for the zombie apocalypse? Probably not. But you are ready for that winter snowstorm that's just right around the corner there in the Wasatch Range that may take out the power for 3 days. And you have food and heat and everything you need at your house. You're prepared to weather that little storm that is going to cause some discomfort for people. And that's prepping.
And that's what I tell people. We watch, I used to love watching Doomsday Preppers, but I tell people, being prepared and having a preparedness lifestyle isn't doing a bunch of drills and hazmat suits. It's not about running around and, the carelessness with firearms we see on those shows is absolutely egregious. One guy showing how he built pipe bombs for home security. I'm sure he got a visit after that show aired. What else? People running into school buses with a bunch of goats and throwing everything and living in a Lego land of shipping containers. if you want to do that, that's absolutely that's fine. Good for you. But we can approach this from a rational perspective. What is most likely going to affect you? Well, anybody can lose their job. Anybody can have a financial setback. I consider preparedness as money in the bank. Also, think about our money in the bank right now. It's all vapors. It's just electronic numbers. That can go away at any time. Look who's in charge of all of the internet right now. It's essentially run by Facebook and Google in lockstep with the general government. Who's to say, Jeff, that somebody couldn't just hack into this and all of our financial resources disappear? Getting a little far-fetched, but if we have a major collapse, that food, your supplies, that becomes your money in the bank. I consider that a form of currency, whether or not you intend to use it for barter or trade. It's there and you have it at your disposal. So what are the mains? Food, shelter, water, security. I tell people that's what you want to start with. What concerns you? We live, you remember Arthur T. Bradley, Jeff, he was the author of that book, The Disaster Preparedness for the Family. Great book. I tell people that was my first book that got me started. Absolutely comprehensive. Shelter, you want to make sure, think about where you live. What is going to be your primary concern? Are you talking about flooding, earthquakes? When I was in California, I started by having a little bag of food by the bed and some shoes. Think about what is going to affect you and plan around there. And it can be really fun. Now, one of the things I want to talk about today is focus on food storage and different means of preserving food independent of being reliant upon the grid. If the power's out, we see this all the time. We just had Hurricane Florence. How many millions were without power? I think we had 1 million without power at one time. Or as CNN said, I think they said 500 million. We don't even have 500 million in the country. But think about what you're going to do if the power's out for a while. Jeff, you're in kind of a remote area like me, aren't you?
Yes, and that's the whole thing. I keep a generator here because and I keep quite a bit of gas stored up as well, because we've had at times up to 4 or 5 days without power during a winter storm when it took out lots of electric poles. We have ice storms here, and it takes out electric lines and poles and trees. Everything comes down, and it just creates a terrible thing. And look at Sandy on the East Coast, in northern New Jersey and right into New York City. What were people doing on the news shows? Where's the government? Where's this? We don't have any water. We don't have this. We don't have that. You don't have to be this massive prepper and put away hundreds of tons of food and all kinds, but you can be prepared for that hurricane on the East Coast or in the South, the tornadoes in the Midwest, the earthquakes in California. We have some things everywhere that could cause you to need to be prepared for, even a week or 10 days without, trucks coming in with more groceries.
And I remember when I first started becoming intrigued with this. Oh, this was probably 20 years ago. There was this massive ice storm in Maryland. And again, what happens when you have an ice storm? You lose power because the power lines get so weighed down with the ice, they come down. So now you have multiple dangers. You don't want to leave your home when there are a lot of down power lines and you don't have power. And it's very, very cold. People were lined up everywhere, waiting for water, waiting for generators, waiting for food and all the supplies they're going to need. First of all, the government can't always get to you in time. You're going to not be very happy. And then if you get in these lines, you have personal security violations or risks that you're taking going out there where there are a lot of people that are starving. They're looking for food. They're frightened. They might go into your home while you're out looking for government assistance and resources. So be prepared to have some stuff. If we had, when you were here, remember we watched American Blackout?
Yeah, I remember that. And I was going to say, you said a minute ago about these the fact that there's things going on. Well, you know, look at Katrina, look at all the went on down there. Look at Sandy again. All those people up there crying, "Where's the government? Where's the government?" You know, you can't expect someone to be there to do it for you. You need to take care of yourself. That's preparedness.
Well,
rugged individualism. That's what we used to be known for in America, is rugged individualism. Well, where did it go? Well, we become sheep waiting for government to do it.
yeah, absolutely. And by the way, speaking of Katrina, look what happened to these people that did seek assistance from the government. They got locked in. They got locked in. What was that big Superdome stadium they had? I don't know what they call that one down there, but they got locked in. The toilets stopped working. Rapes were rampant. Violence. I mean, this is crazy. Why would you want to do this when you can? And I know there was significant flooding in Katrina and some people had to flee for their lives, but we've talked about this before. When you have a hurricane, you've got days notice. You don't have that when there is earthquake or a wildfire that just starts up. But for a situation like that, if you can't evacuate and you don't need to evacuate and you can stay in your home, be ready to stay there. So let's talk about that. We're not going to talk about a situation where you have to evacuate. Your home, there's chaos outside from some sort of a natural disaster or a storm. You have no power for a while. I love to can food. You know that. Doomsday Preppers didn't do a lot of shows on that because it's really boring to watch somebody in their kitchen cleaning jars, sticking them in a, hot water bath, looking at them and hearing the cans pop. You have to kind of be a canaholic to really enjoy that stuff. But it makes for good preparedness at home. And one of the things that I tell people, this is a great time of year to get started. It is hunting season. I love to preserve my wild game in canning jars. People might think that's kind of gross, but it really isn't. I take my deer and elk meat and I cook it up. I grind it and I cook it like hamburger meat, seasoned with onions. It's ready to go. I like to make meals. The thing is too, if you don't want to can your own food, I always recommend having cans of chunky soup on hand. I have no commercial ties with Campbell's, but they have the little pop-off tops. You don't have to add water. You can actually eat them straight out of the cans, which is why I also like canning my own food. I like to have food that is nutritious, good calorie content, and comforting. Lots of protein. That's why I love to can meat. I will make stews. I have soups ready to go, chili ready to go. Even if it's hard to heat up, you can open those and eat them. They've been, I guess, pasteurized because of the canning process. But you can do that. People think that all you can do with canning food is making jellies and jams, and that's not the case. So take your harvests also, rather than just sticking them in a freezer, what you're not doing, from your garden. If you grow food, we got so many tomatoes this year and I processed those, canned them. I still have some from my garden in California. And when I opened those tomato and corn, they smell so fresh. It was like I just packaged them yesterday. There are a lot of websites out there so you can learn how to use your pressure canner, hot water bath canner. But I tell you what, if it comes down to it, you're really going to appreciate the homemade food that you have on hand rather than just opening something up from a can. You're really going to like this. I like to can chicken. I can elk. I can venison. I can mule deer. And then you can also, like I said, make stocks, make soups, all that ahead of time. And here's this article, The Prepper's Will, Prepping Your Pantry for the Long Haul. I found this on Mind for Survival. There's a group out here, Facebook, mindforsurvival.com. They have a website. Our friend Brian Duff, who's been on this show. In fact, he helped us with some of our technical stuff on there. Really good guy. So go check out Mind for Survival. But this was an article that was posted on his group. And again, this is about prepping your pantry for the long haul. This stuff will last a long time. If canning's not your thing, there are other ways to get food. You can buy some of the freeze-dried food. Many, many options. They have those food buckets. Do you have any of those, Jeff?
I have some. I don't have a lot of them. We store up a lot of we buy canned foods, and we store up some, and we just rotate it out as we'll take from the stock that I store and then put new stock back to replace what we use.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's just, again, one warning I want to issue is some people will think, well, they have these sales. Well, you can get a year's supply of this food, and they show this massive stack of these food buckets. I highly advise against that. This is something you want to add to your supply, but don't expect to live off of it. The problem with these foods is that they are ridiculously high in sodium. The first survival class I took, the instructor said, you live on this for a year, you're not going to live on it for a year, you'll be dead. So keep in mind, this is why I like to have the bulk of my food storage be stuff that I made, that I canned, I preserved. You don't even have to add sodium. I don't add salt. I just add herbs and other things because you don't want that much salt that they have in these freeze-dried options. You can also dehydrate your own food, or you can buy dehydrated foods. You can add those. One thing I also like to do is I have a ton of stock, or you can even buy the powdered bouillon. So you can add that. I like to buy these when I buy the freeze-dried foods, for instance. I don't buy the breakfast. Well, like they'll say for 72 hours, you're going to pay an exorbitant price for nothing more than orange powder drink or a few tablespoons of oatmeal. Don't do that. Get the stuff that are entrees only or meats only, and then you can add them to your own dehydrated vegetables and so on and so forth, and make your own soups, stews, whatever you want to do. That's all available. But Jeff, I think that's one of my favorite prepping hobbies is canning. It's a lot of fun, but it doesn't make for good television or really radio, but it is something that people really need to understand. It's such a great way to be independent if you have an issue like this.
Right. And, you have to have food, you have to have water. And again, this isn't about putting away tons of food, waiting for the zombies to come. It is being prepared for whatever comes your way. Like you said, ice storms, snowstorms in the Rocky Mountains. You name your calamity, it's there. We have, think about this, Suzanne. We have probably one of the, and this isn't original to me. I've heard this from someone else. We have probably one of the we live on the most dangerous continent just about in the world. Do you hear a lot of earthquakes and stuff in Europe, or hurricanes hitting Europe, or Africa, or really, we live on about the most dangerous continent in the world. So it just kind of pays to be prepared for whatever little thing happens.
Well, Arthur Bradley, again, I mentioned him earlier. He refers to the continental landmass upon which this American Union rests as the most dangerous continent on the planet when it comes to weather. And he talks about the 5 horsemen of death: tornadoes, fires, floods, earthquakes, and I don't remember the other one, but there are 5 of them. And hurricanes, and then hurricanes have floods and tornadoes that you have to think about. So this is why it's really important. It's not that we're just far out there, conspiracy theorists thinking that the only reason you need to prepare is a government collapse. We have a plethora of examples, a plethora of reasons to encourage you to be ready. Because again, if you just depend on somebody else and they fail, you only have yourself to blame. There's an interesting article, and I want to bring this up because it shows that things can happen. It's called the Top 15 Scary Things That Can Happen When SHTF, when the poop hits the fan. And again, life after a calamity will be fought with peril. Again, we don't have to have a major calamity. One of the reasons I brought this, I wanted to read this article, is even though it's somewhat sensationalistic with the poop hitting the fan scenario, these are things that can happen at any time. The first instance they give, I don't know if we have time to go through all of them. It's called a shocking turn. After the storm finally passed you and you gather the kids, spouse, dog, and gather into the SUV to head for somebody's house after winding your way through the rubble patch, used to be your hometown, going down through these formerly recognizable streets. Now I'm thinking big hurricane or something like this, or tornado. You get out to clear a large piece of sheet metal from the road. A listing power pole finally yields under the strain, crashes to the ground. A live power line. What have we been saying? What is one of the major concerns with these storms is power lines, also trees taking the power lines down. We saw this with Hurricane Florence, Tropical Storm Florence, when it went through the south. What was that? Was it St. Augustine, Florida, that has all those trees? One of those cities, the major damage was from the trees. Again, don't get out if you don't have to. Number 2, the fridge is out. It's been 2 weeks since the lights went out. After the explosion at the power plant sent your country back to the Stone Age, your little county, it says here, there's little chance of getting power and supplies to your small village. Your generator and heavy-duty power bank were ready for just such an occasion. You wisely invested in dual redundant sources of electricity to power your mini fridge, keeping your life-saving anticoagulant medication on cold. Again, think about people that have to keep medications refrigerated. If you could run the AC. After returning home from a jaunt to check on your sister and niece, you return to find the quiet buzz of your mini fridge silent. Fear clutches your chest. You check the power bank. Green, it appears. The cheap mini fridge you gave up the ghost, and the inside is not even passably cool. You have no power. What's happened? You can't keep your things cool like this. That's something we need to think about. But again, how are you going to live without refrigeration? Well, one of the things I like to say, that's canning for you. If you don't rely on that, you can have your harvest preserved for years and you don't have to worry about your refrigerator going out. They talk about a hostile takeover when you go out and then you find that people have taken over. For instance, here's a scenario with the bug out plan. They have a cabin in the woods. What happens? You make the long and tumultuous and perilous journey to get there, only to find somebody else has taken it over. And when they level that rifle in your direction, you're not gonna fight them about that. So lots of interesting scenarios here. They talk about the woods for people that want to just bug out in the woods. There are going to be a lot of other people doing that as well. Unwelcome visitors, you got to be able to secure what you have. Also, you have to think about personal security. Are you going to be cooking food, running a generator when stuff like this happens and people are out there looking? So it's just interesting scenarios that can also apply, like I said, to everyday life when they talk about the sting of winter. If you're not ready and the power goes out, this is something you should be ready for anyway. We lose power in Utah. We lose power up here in the mountains. I've got my generator. I get snowed in here. Happens once or twice every winter. I'm fine. I've got my canned foods. I've got everything else. If I got snowed in and the power went out and my generator failed, we have backups for that too. Think about how unpleasant it can be where you live and plan accordingly. If you live in a place with a moderate climate and you don't have to worry about a deep freeze, you might not have to store a ton of firewood or have multiple ways to keep yourself warm. Here we have propane, we have a wood stove, we have a furnace, multiple ways. And if all else fails, have extra clothes. But your shelter is really important. And if you don't have to leave, then don't. Then don't, because we already talked about this. The perils of going out when people are already struggling, their kids are hungry. It's amazing how violent people will get when their kids are screaming because they're hungry and they don't have food. So there are so many reasons. I really like taking the time to remind people why you want to be prepared and how you can get started. It doesn't have to be sensationalistic. Get yourself some canned food. Before you need to learn skills is the time to do it. I learned to hunt while I wasn't under the pressure of having to hunt. Learn how to grow food, learn how to preserve food, so it's there when you need it. I don't understand why so many people are so reluctant to do this. Why do you think that is, Jeff? Do you think it's like a normalcy bias thing?
I'm not really sure why people so avoid this whole idea. It really isn't, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this isn't about being ready for the end of the world. It is really about being ready just for the little things in life that happen. And again, here's another scenario that could come along. You lose your job. You may need to feed your family for a month or so because you don't have work. So now what are you going to do if, well, we got welfare now. So they'll give you food stamps and all, where did all this individualism go? Why are we so dependent on government? Government that fails at everything else they do. That fails.
Yeah, but they're going to save us when we really need them. They're finally going to get it right. Let me go into also number 9, because here's another example that they use for everything going catastrophic, but this can happen. In fact, we just had flash floods here a month ago. You did not wait for things to get bad before heading out with your partner. The rains were intense, but you could still drive. The roads were still passable so long as you were careful, but you had to avoid a couple intersections. They're talking about the water rising fast floods. This happens all the time. This is stuff you need to be prepared for. Again, personal security, know what the weather's going to be like out there, situational awareness. Also, they talk about a scenario cleaned out. And this is something I alluded to a few moments ago as well. When you leave your place to either go get supplies or go check on somebody else, not saying don't go check on somebody else, but this is something you have to think of as well. You might come back to find your entire place cleaned out. Remember, law enforcement isn't going to be available to help you. How many of them, by the way, went to help and protect their own families during Hurricane Katrina? Rely on yourself. Rely on yourself. You and your neighbors can come up and put a plan together. So again, this is we just really wanted to take a chance here. They talk about not a drop fit to drink. We've seen water lines burst. They freeze. You can lose your supply. You can have Greg Carpenter and I did a show also about the vulnerability of the water supply as well. An act of terrorism could contaminate our water. Well, you'll have some time if you have some stored up. Think about 3 gallons a day per person. Here's another little trick I was telling a friend of mine too. Anytime you have shampoo or some sort of soap, body soap, anything like that, when the bottle's empty, fill it with water. Because that way, when you need to wash, people really do overlook preparing for being hygienic. That is sanitation. That will keep you healthy. That's water that you will have ready, and you don't have to waste your drinking water on cleaning yourself. This is water that's already soapy. You can get started. How many people don't think about that stuff? I think what's important to remember is there are things that you take advantage of in your everyday life. If you don't have them, you're really going to miss them. I go out, my thing is reading glasses. I just go and get a whole bunch of them at Walmart and get different strengths, because you might have to read some instructions, for instance, on some of your supplies that you never learned how to use. What if you don't have any glasses and you can't find any more and you can't read the directions? Things like that are often so overlooked, but it doesn't take a lot of time to prepare. So I ask people, think about what might happen for you, both in or outside the home. Winter is coming. So if you live in a place like I do in the mountains, you want to have your winter vehicle preparedness kit in that car. Starting now, it is cold at night. You get in an accident at night or even out here during the day, the structural integrity of that vehicle gets compromised. You need a way to stay warm, a way to stay hydrated, and a way to contact people. So let's see. Anything else you want to add to that, Jeff? I'm really glad that we got all this out there. We haven't done a show on this in some time.
Yeah, it was nice to get back to something a little less, I don't know. It's so depressing. Sometimes I think this whole political climate, we talked about a little bit with what are you going to do if the blue tide doesn't come in. Oh, sorry about that. We never really got to the how to be prepared for that, but we'll do that another day.
Well, I think that's just an example of what we're talking about now. There might be a time when you don't want to go out of the house. There could be a riot. Look what happened in Los Angeles with the riots after Rodney King. You can have this civil insurrection that we've talked about before, And also be prepared for that. You could just be walking around the corner. If you got your MAGA hat, depending on where you go, I'm really careful about where we go. And I've had people accost me because I open carry. Yeah, there are a lot of reasons why people shouldn't open carry. There's a lot of reasons why people like me do. So more stuff to come on preparedness. I hope you enjoy it. And let me know if you have any questions specifically on how to get prepared. I want to thank you, Jeff, for joining me on this discussion today and getting us back on track with what we like to talk about. We do preparedness. We do politics. We've got it all there. So check out our show, Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Thank you for listening.